What most people don't get is that Year 12 Maths rewards creative problem solving, while the UCAT rewards speed and selectivity. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm never going to get the QR score that I need because I suck at maths, then this video is going to be your reality check. My name's Farhan, I'm a junior doctor and I've helped over 100 students get into medicine and dentistry across Australia. And today, you're going to learn how to see QR as a trainable system, not a talent test. We're going to look at what skills to build, what questions to skip, and what to focus on in your preparation. So I really just want to open this with a bit of a story. I had two friends of mine. One was a whiz at maths. They were really good at what they did when it came to maths. And one was a bit lost when it came to even some of the basics of Year 12 mathematics. Now, the guy on the left here, whiz. One of the state's best, right? Raw 50 methods, raw 50 specialist when it came to Victoria. So look, it really doesn't get better than that when it comes to testing your maths. Now the guy on the right here, he struggled. To be honest, he struggled with maths. He only ended up scoring a raw 37. And, it came to a point in year 12 where it wasn't until term 2 that he could complete the square when it came to quadratics. And, if you're not familiar with quadratics, it's pretty basic stuff that we should know maybe in year 11, right? So, all the way up till year 12, and even in year 12, this guy struggled with maths. So, who do you think is going to do better when it comes to QR? You see, while the person that was a whiz at year 12 maths scored a 750, the person that couldn't complete the square until year 12 in term 2 scored an 880. Now, 750 is not a bad score by any means, but this person could have done better, especially if their innate, caliber at maths was to get such high scores, to be some of the state's best. And the reason I'm telling you this is because QR doesn't care about how good you are at maths. If you've always seen yourself as not a maths person, first of all, don't do that. Don't label yourself like that. But two, you 100% have the capacity to get more than an 800. I've seen living proof of it. And if you've always liked maths, and if maths is your thing, well, take this as a warning. There's no guarantee that you're going to do well. Because at the end of the day, they test different skills. While year 12 tests your ability to problem solve, to sit down and really think through a question, to be able to sometimes even think creatively outside of the box to solve whatever problem you're on, the UCAT is all about time efficiency. Can you interpret the question quickly? Can you calculate whatever you need to in record time? That's what the UCAT is all about. When it comes to UCAT maths, it's based on year 9 to 10 GCSE maths. Now, most of you guys are going to be past that level, so this level of maths. You can do it. The bottleneck is not the difficulty, but instead the level of time that you have to do these questions. So let me introduce you to the 3 F's of QR, where if QR is genuinely something you feel like is a weakness of yours, then this is the roadmap that you need to follow. Number 1 is foundation. 2 is filter, and 3 is focus. Foundation is all about building the skills that QR actually uses. Filter is deciding in advance what questions to do and what to skip, and focus is all about prioritizing QR in your practice day to day. So let's start with foundation. First of all, you need to understand the core skills. And I'm talking basics, right? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And look, every single one of you watching this video knows how to do these 4 operations. But the real delta when it comes to QR is knowing when to use each of them in worded questions. Now, this sounds really simple, right? But it's more about being able to interpret the question properly, being able to identify key variables in the question so that as soon as you read what the question is asking of you, so that means I need to multiply this value and that value, get the average of those, and then divide by this so that I can get the difference between them, so subtract. If you can understand the basics at that level, that's really what it's testing. Now, if you want to improve at that, and you haven't already, then go watch my video on question interpretation and identifying key variables where I break this down in almost a scientific level depth. Next, what you need to know is the core skills of the question types. Percentages, working with fractions and decimals, speed, distance, time, averages, area and geometry, and being quick, and I mean quick, with the calculator. These are core skills that you need, and that's basically what the rest of my videos for QR on this channel are for. So that brings us to step number 2, which is going to be the filter, to decide in advance what questions you want to do and what questions you want to skip. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I really want to drive this point home. You have to be selective, especially if you see QR as a personal weakness of yours and that's what your data's telling you, then you need to be selective. This goes for everyone, by the way. If you're watching this and you're relatively comfortable with QR, then this still applies to you, but it just applies more so to people that struggle with QR. Not every question needs to be done. That's the main message. Because at the end of the day, the difficulty of questions that are given to you in QR, you can plot them on a bell curve. And they look something along the lines of this, where pretend that's symmetrical. This is around 50%, where it essentially means 50% of the questions are easier than average, and 50% of them are harder, such that the average UCAT test taker should be getting around 50th percentile mark when it comes to quantitative reasoning. And on top of that, most of the questions tend to fall in this sort of distribution here. So what that means is most of them are kind of medium difficulty questions. There are some really easy questions, but there are also some questions that are quite difficult. Now, it's actually not the same bell curve for everyone, because the difficulty depends on how comfortable you are with those questions yourself. If you're comfortable, then even with the same exact exam as somebody else, you might see that the questions lie more on the easier side than anything, where most of the questions are on the easier to middle side, and then there are only a select few that might be on those harder sides, because you're just comfortable with the maths, you're quick, you're good with it. But if you feel like you struggle with maths, then you might be feeling like a lot of the questions are down here, where there's not that many easy questions that you could do with like your eyes closed. But most of them fit in this category, and you actually find a lot of those questions to be hard to do in time. That's probably what the bell curve looks like for you. Now, the fact of the matter is, no matter what your bell curve looks like, you approach it the same way every single time, where you do things in order of increasing difficulty. If you're comfortable with maths, it's left to right. If you struggle with maths, it's left to right. And what does that mean? It means not going from question 1 to 36. It means picking and choosing the questions you want to do, being ultra selective, doing the ones that you're comfortable with, and then the next layer of comfortable, and then the next layer of comfortable, until by the end of it, what's left is questions that you would have really struggled with anyways. And the reason I say that is, look, even if you feel like all the questions are down this end, it is still 100% within your ability to get at least these questions within your control. So if you're missing out on questions here because you get stuck on a question here because you felt like you could do it, you wanted to give it a shot, even though you know QR is not something that you're all that comfortable with, then that's on you. So don't leave these marks that you otherwise could have got because you're trapped. You're stuck on a question that honestly was designed to keep you stuck to begin with. So if you want a deeper breakdown, then watch my skipping strategies video where I go through VR, DM, and QR all in one. That's literally what that video is there for. So filter and be selective. And point number 3 is going to be to focus, which is to prioritize QR in your practice. Look, the fact that you've identified your weakness as QR is actually a fantastic thing, because it means now what you do is you put time towards improving QR disproportionately to the other sections. You don't need to allocate your time equally amongst all 3 sections. You spend time according to what you need to improve. Now, by the way, your data should be telling you this. If your data is telling you you're sitting at 790 while your VR is sitting in your 600s, then work on your VR. Okay? Do what your data tells you. But if you've identified your weakness here as QR, in that your QR scores are genuinely just lower than your VR and DM ones, then this is your sign to start practicing at it. And so what it might look like is, if we pull up the UCAT study timetable, is you can see with what I recommend, there's a lot of space for practicing your weaknesses, mocks and weaknesses. And if I were you, what I'd be doing is slotting in QR into these sections. And if you do that, you'll see you'll literally be working on QR almost on a daily basis. When it comes to these things, guys, the more consistent you are, the better. Granted that every single time you're doing things, you're doing it to improve and not just going through the motions. The more consistent you are, the quicker you're going to improve. Don't just give yourself 2 or 3 opportunities a week to improve at QR if that's your weakness. Give yourself, even if you want, tack on QR to this every single day. So if I were you, then I would be putting in QR into my weakness section here. Now, if you want a bit more insight into how to set up the UCAT study timetable, then I've got a video on that too, so you can watch that. But the point here being is it's great that you've identified QR as a weakness, but you need to act on this now. You need to actually schedule in time to work on it as a weakness of yours. So, guys, that's the 3 F's of QR practice: foundation, filter, and focus. For foundation, you build the skills you need to use. For filter, you decide in advance what questions you want to do and skip. And for focus, you actually do the work to prioritize QR in your practice. So guys, this is just one of the many methods that I have to help you with the UCAT. And if you want all my methods and frameworks in one place, then just click the first link in the description below. Otherwise, let's kick on to some traps that people fall into when it comes to QR. Number 1 is believing QR success is based entirely on talent and using that as an excuse not to do the work. Number 2 is trying to brute force your way through all the questions instead of being selective about the questions you do. Guys, if you're sitting there thinking you suck at maths, you are the person that needs to be ultra selective about the questions you do, because you can't afford the time to get stuck on a question that'll stop you from getting to those easier marks. And number 3 is not prioritizing QR in your practice. And what you'll find is a lot of people avoid prioritizing their weakness because it gives them an ego hit every single time they practice it. Instead, they'd rather be focusing on those strengths. Now, the thing is, the section that you don't want to work on the most, the question type you don't want to work on the most, is probably the thing that you need to do the most. So here's your do's and don'ts. Do accept that QR tests timing skills more than it does raw math skills. Do build your foundation of core skills and do prioritize QR in your practice. Don't use I suck at maths as an excuse to avoid QR. It means you should be doing it more. Don't try to be a hero and solve every question, and don't wing test day. You got to know what questions you're going to skip in advance. So here's your next step. You need to make QR a priority. I want you to go to your study timetable and assign weakness equals QR. Then actually do the practice. Now, in terms of what practice you should be doing, look, do untimed if you want to get comfortable with the concepts or the methods, the techniques and the formulas, so that you understand how to go about these questions. You've got to learn to walk before you learn to run. But as soon as you know how to walk, then it's time to go into the timed questions so that you can build that skill of actually doing it quickly under pressure. That's the difference between the people that are really good at year 12 maths and the people that are really good at UCAT maths, where given infinite time in the world, they're going to get 36 out of 36. Like the maths, the difficulty of the maths is not the bottleneck. What the bottleneck is the time pressure. So you need to work on that skill. Now, if you don't already have a question platform to do these practice questions with, then you can use the code Farhan for 10% off med entry. Otherwise, assign QR as a weakness, make it a priority, and go do your practice.